Today I'm here with a step-by-step video for you. We'll paint a watercolor of a building's entrance from start to finish. I hope you enjoy it too. To start off, I should mention I used Winsor Newton watercolors. For your painting, feel free to use any color combo you like. There's no need to match my colors exactly. Use the colors, it's up to you. I'm just going to tell you the techniques. To start with, I use the wet in wet technique, that is the base work of painting the work. Whatever it is now, whatever the design, I will do my work with a pencil. That's why I'm using the wet in wet technique now. The following plan is going to disappear if you don't know the following plan. Exactly where should you paint? It is better to use a regular colored pencil, which don't have a problem for you, and it will be erased in your pocket and you don't know where to paint it and how to paint. As you can see in the picture, I wet the surface of the work first, the surface of my cardboard. And then from the color I want, now the color is very faded. And you can use the dry technique, but well, I think it's best to add depth to these paintings. Use wet on wet technique as we progress with the painting. We'll discuss how to handle light from a specific source. Where should light hit and shadows fall? Let's look at our painting. You can see I've covered the entire surface of my work. For example, I'm painting the leaves at the top of the tree. Never start with light and dark colors together. Try to begin with a light base color. You can add darker shades later. This makes your work easier and prevents frustration when the color is too dark. You can't lighten watercolors easily unless you use gouache, for instance. Well, as you can see in the image now, I've applied the base color to almost the entire work surface. Now let's move on to the door. I chose a very light gray color because it's neutral. Any other color I might want to add later won't clash with my painting. In my original design, I decided to paint the door frame the same gray color. Don't be afraid, worst case, your painting doesn't turn out perfect. You can always discard it if you're not satisfied. You're not losing anything. The experience you gain is far more valuable than being too scared to start. If this video can encourage even one person to pick up whatever art supplies they have at home and start painting, it'll definitely stimulate their mind. It feels great to be useful. Now, about these flower pots I'm coloring. I'm adding a very light base color to these parts. Later, we'll determine our light source, where the light's coming from, where it's darkening, where there's shadow, and where it's brightening. Currently, in this image, I'm just applying the basic base color. It's not very technical yet. For the ground area, I used a wet on dry technique. The bottom of my brush was dry, and I just wet the tip before applying. This is up to you. If you're a beginner, you can simply wet your brush, pick up the color, and apply it directly to your canvas. The wet on wet technique can be harder to control as the color spreads everywhere, which might be challenging for beginners. Looking at the image now, I've almost identified our light source. It's coming from the left, but There's a wall next to our entrance. If you look at the left corner, you'll see the wall and a protrusion that casts a shadow on our entrance area. I want the light source to be on the left. The two lamps I've included should also emit some light, which will cast shadows on the wall they're mounted on. Try to consider these details before you start to avoid problems later. Now I'm adding some flowers to the design you're seeing. The color isn't crucial. You can use any color you like. Now that we've identified the gear, I want to work on the wall next to the entrance door using bricks. I'll use a brush with a slightly rectangular tip. With this brush, I'll start drawing the bricks one by one. Keep in mind that this requires patience. Go slowly and use a light color. As you can see in the image, the brush has a rectangular tip, which makes it easier for me to draw the brick tiles. Also, note that in brick painting, the bricks aren't usually stacked directly on top of each other. There's a gap between every other brick, as you can see in the picture. Now I want to add shadows. As I mentioned, I'll consider the light source to be on the left side of the image. The first thing casting a shadow on the wall is the door's protrusion. It casts a shadow on the adjacent wall. I'll use a light grey for this, the same grey as the initial base colour of frame 2. I knocked and came with the same colour. Now I'm adding shadows. The more detailed your shadows are, the more natural your painting will look, giving you a better result. As you can see in the image above, we have a painting with a window. The window's lip casts a shadow, meaning the light source is on the side. If it's on the left, it casts a full shadow on the wall. The protrusion I mentioned on the right side of my work also casts a shadow on the adjacent wall. The pot in front casts a shadow too. As you can see, I'm drawing each shadow that falls on our work surface, adding as much detail as possible to these shadows. Definitely your painting will become more beautiful. Perhaps the initial assessment of where the shadows fall may be a bit difficult if you are not very familiar with the subject of light and shadow. Getting a main reference source, like a real photo, can help. If you go out for a walk and see a very beautiful door, you can take a picture of it. When the sunlight is at an angle, for example from 10 AM to 12 PM or 4 PM to 5 PM, it creates more appealing shadows in the image that you can capture and use as a reference for your painting. I'm adding shadows here because the base color I initially used for the door was very faint. I'm adding shadows under the door since the upper part above the door, where there is vegetation, casts a shadow. The wall on the left and the tree next to the door in the reference photo I took also cast shadows on the sidewalk, which I will now add. This will give your work more dimension and make it more beautiful. If you don't have a reference photo for your art, you can follow along with this painting I'm doing step by step. These shadows I'm drawing on the stairs and by the door are the parts facing away from our light source. If the sun is on the left, these areas become darker. The frame itself casts a shadow around our main wooden door. The top part also gets shadowed. As you can see in the video, I'm coloring these areas. Now with watercolors, if you're not familiar, they fade as they dry. Each layer we add makes the texture bolder and more natural. Now I want to paint these two flower pots in front, using a darker color I have. I'm trying not to abruptly paint the lit areas of these pots with the dark color. I'm careful not to suddenly use this new, darker color I'm adding. I try to add some smudges to my work. In watercolor, the more you learn about light and shadow and work with this concept, the better. Add white or light spots to your painting. It makes the work look more natural and beautiful. When you paint a surface completely, even if you add shadows, it doesn't look very watercolor-like. It's as if the watercolor is applied all over. The more light and dark spots are placed correctly next to each other, the more beautiful your work becomes. As you can see now, I'm not going to paint this flower pot all one color. The part under the pot, just like we've always seen in nature or through our camera because of the volume of leaves, will definitely be darker. These leaves at the top of this tree, at our entrance that we're working on, you need to keep in mind that your light source is coming from the left, and certainly the leaves on the left side of the image will be brighter. You're moving to the right side of your painting, creating darker leaves and spots. This definitely enhances your work. It takes patience. In future videos, I'll make a full tutorial about this vegetation, like vines and climbing plants on brick walls or similar surfaces. I'll show how to paint them naturally while keeping a fantasy element. As you can see, I've made the left side lighter and the right side darker. Once this layer dries, we'll add darker green spots to make it look more natural. Now let's move on to those windows. I'll paint a very light blue on the top window, then add a darker brown shade. It's quite pale now, so the shadows I've added are fine to paint over. They're just a guide to show where to darken and shade. It's best to start by sketching your design with a colored or non-erasable pencil. I made a mistake earlier when coloring. I used a watercolor pencil, and when I applied the base color, it erased the original design. Now the squares you see are a bit out of order. I'm sketching an eye, but it's not very neat. It's better to draw your lines with a pencil first to avoid issues later. Now I'll color it with a darker shade, a deep brown I mixed. To make brown, if your palette has it, use that. If not, mix green, yellow and red. You can adjust the shade by adding colors. A bit of yellow makes it mustard-like. More green darkens it. More red gives a reddish brown. It's up to you. If you have brown, darken it with black or navy. There's no strict rule. It's all about how it looks in the watercolor. Don't limit yourself too much. Whatever feels good, go with it and start now. I'm coloring the stairs because wood was used for the steps front. Now we need to be mindful of our light source. It's on the left, but for these two pots, the wall next to them has a protrusion casting a shadow. This makes the left side darker than usual. Normally, without the tree and protrusion, we darken the right side and keep the left brighter due to the light. I'm darkening under the main protrusion now. I'm adding some patterns in the entrance area with a darker grey. If they look too sharp, you can soften them with water or blend the colors to avoid a harsh look. Always remember to be patient and let each layer dry. Work step by step and don't let colors mix too much. I'm adding bricks one by one, sizing them to fit the painting's proportions. For example, a very wide brick wouldn't suit this painting's scale. It matches the vase and other elements in the picture. I vary the brick colors, not using just one shade. I mix colors, creating lighter and darker areas. After the first layer, I'll add some much darker bricks to create depth and contrast. Add orange, even red if you like. It's up to you. What you see now is me painting these bricks one by one. I'm covering the entire wall around the door. Then I'll slowly add shadows and other details to complete it. Just as I mentioned, be patient and don't worry if you make mistakes. If something goes wrong, it's fine. You'll know where the error is. If it's not obvious, no problem. Now, as you can see, we've placed our light source on the left. The drain pipe is slightly to the right because the light hitting the object darkens it. The wall lights we have follow the same principle. Their left side is brighter, while the right side is darker. Now I'll use a much darker grey to add the main shadows to the work. As you can see, where the light source doesn't reach, like the door's edge on the left side, it's much darker. I'll add each part of the handle, drawing just one side. Later I'll add yellow or gold to make it look nice. The square parts inside will get darker, about 10 to 15 centimeters inward, becoming completely shaded. For the pots, considering the left protrusion and the shading wall and tree, I darken the left side. I'm using a much darker green for the plant volume to show it better. As the top greens have dried, I'm using a slightly darker green. You can mix in navy blue or brown to make the green richer and clearer, yet darker. Adding black would dull the color. As you can see, I'm now using a darker brick red shade. I'm darkening some bricks in my work. This adds depth and makes it look better. Use this technique sparingly throughout. Don't darken the whole surface at once. For example, darken 3 bricks on one side, 2 on another, keeping proportions balanced. Pay attention to this. I've added a bit of red to the top of the image. Bricks sometimes have a reddish tint. In the video you'll see I'm darkening the bottom where the wall meets the ground. This is a design principle. Where it touches the ground, you should show more stability. You can bring these colors of bricks, even brown or even orange in your work, but I preferred to add a darker color, a little red, and to a very limited extent just add these pieces to make my work look more beautiful and my workload becomes more natural and beautiful. And the next point that you should now have in painting the door. Let's consider that now I have to come to that part of the glass that has a frame, and I have to work with that frame because the door is completely inside and it is darkened, and then I come to the final darkness, which means the shadow that has hit the door, and this has been done several times. We have to make it darker because I felt that it has dried up now, and a lot. It is better to have a darker color as a shadow inside the door to take out the workload and make the work more beautiful. And these shadows all depend on how careful you are that you see the shadows in your surroundings, how the shadows are at different times of the day, given that the sun moves and the shadows move. Which one is it? And the more beautiful you can see these shadows and pay more attention to these shadows, well, your work will definitely be better. This protrusion that I told you that has cast a shadow on this wall of ours, I will add the darkness again. If you remember, first of all, we darkened here completely, and now I am darkening the shadow parts of the work again. I add my work with this darker color so that the workload is more beautiful, and it is not very difficult in my opinion, painting with watercolor on the condition that you are bored with layers and layers dry and patiently stain the places that get dark, the places where it becomes light, and in this way your work seems to me to be both natural and you will enjoy yourself. And in general, I think the process of enjoyment. Now I want to add some darkness to this part of the window above the door, and one darkness that I wash the brush, and with a color that is a wet brush, I will reduce those darkness from it. Now I want to draw the darkness on this part of the lamp and the shadow that these lights themselves cast on the wall. You can see in the picture if you come step by step with me. Come forward and now. With whatever color you like, it is not necessary that your color should be similar to mine. Start with it and add these darknesses layer by layer until your painting is finished. I will open the leaves above the bottom of the work that is exactly on that doorway with a much darker green color. I want to make our work look more beautiful. In my opinion, the best part of watercolor painting is adding shadows and darker tones. My style usually involves finishing touches with a grey marker that's water soluble. Once the painting is dry, I use this to enhance certain lines, making them sharper and more defined. It's important to use a medium grey, not too dark or light. If it's too dark, it can overpower the painting. I prefer this method over using a pen or black ink for final details. I wanted to show the work's surface colour with watercolour. That's why I'm using grey. The header part needs to be sharper and the surrounding stone should be fully visible. So I'm using this pen to darken the header and other details you see in the video. Not all artists do this, it's my personal style. I prefer using this technique to make some lines sharper and clearer. If you want, try it and tell me how it changes your painting. If you don't like it, you can leave the watercolor as is, just with these stains. You've worked on this and added some highlights. I think that's enough and there's no need to add anything else. Now, if you'd like, sign your painting, write your name on it, or even date it. This way, if you decide to seriously pursue art, after a year you can look back and see how your painting has changed. It's a whole different ballgame now. Be cautious because we're using a completely new tool that's prone to errors which can be clearly seen in your work. Your lines need to be clean. If you aren't able to draw a clean line by hand, use a ruler to avoid messing up your painting. Any mistakes in these finishing lines, whether in anatomy, landscape painting or any other additions, can seriously ruin your work and your entire painting might be lost. I'm also depicting parts of the stone edges around this valley right now, on both sides, so watch carefully. I sketched a bit of the line, and yes, it appears whole, but it would have been better if I'd used a ruler from the start. I'd love for you to start painting now using watercolors or another medium you like. Please write in the comments about your experiences with watercolors or any other art tools. I want to hear about what you do, how you paint, the unique techniques you use that others might not know about and that are uniquely yours. You don't need to give away your secrets, but let's chat here. That's how we can create something truly awesome. I'll see you in the next video.